Hello friends, we are on chapter 37, Canaries in Coal Mines, Portsmouth, Ohio. For years after it closed, David Proctor's Plaza Healthcare Clinic would be known as the boot camp for dirty docs, but Proctor's influence went far beyond the unscrupulous doctors he brought to town. Instead, he showed Scioto County that starting a pain clinic was easy. Given an opening in Ohio state law, all he had to do was lease a building and hire a doctor who had a DEA permit to write prescriptions for Schedule II narcotics. Pain clinics were now sprouting up across America as the opiates became commonly used for chronic pain, and the undertreatment of pain was identified as a public health problem. Not all pain clinics were pill mills, but as opiates became the principal treatment for pain, the pain clinic was often prone to abuse. It attracted patients relentlessly demanding drugs. Doctors found it hard to maintain standards. Some clinics were never legitimate, but many others started with good intentions and were simply pushed off course by patients' constant demands. No place in America had more of these shady clinics per capita than did Scioto County, Ohio. Over the first years of the new century, a local junkyard owner, an attorney, a prison guard, an ex-bailiff, and a couple of convicted felons, as well as several doctors, all opened clinics, hiring doctors with permits to write the prescriptions and see patients at a rapid clip. Jody Robinson cashed in his car stereo shop to open a pain clinic through which he became, according to a later indictment, one of the region's biggest pill distributors. Portsmouth became America's pill mill capital. The clinics were some of the only locally owned businesses to form in decades in Scioto County. People said the area's entrepreneurial spirit had drained from Portsmouth. In a twisted way, the pill mill showed that locals could still be as entrepreneurial as anyone. Billboards for pain clinics greeted travelers along the highways entering town. Drug dealers and users for miles around came to Portsmouth to stock up on pills. One key to the pill mill explosion was the discovery of locum tenens lists, a clearinghouse for doctors around the country seeking temporary employment. Many of these doctors were desperate. They had license problems, or couldn't get malpractice insurance, or were alcoholics. These were the docs Proctor had hired. Now other clinic owners did the same, and quacks flocked to Portsmouth. Tracy Bias, a convicted felon, opened 3 pain clinics and hired doctors from New Mexico, Michigan, and Iowa, as well as 2 from other parts of Ohio. Clinic staffers, or locum tenens doctors, found work at a pain clinic, learned the business, and then went on their own. Soon, plain old drug dealers got in on the scam. Kevin Huff, a longtime marijuana dealer, set up a trailer alongside a highway in Chillicothe, Ohio, hired a nurse, and sold so many pills that he had shoeboxes full of cash lying around his home. Several of the new clinic entrepreneurs had worked for David Proctor. Nancy Sadler worked for Proctor and then ran Fortune Williams Clinic. After Williams went to prison, she and her husband, Lester Ape Sadler, set up their own pain clinics. Proctor's one-time attorney, Gary Rocker Billiter, opened a pain clinic as well. After Proctor's arrest, his employees, Denise Huffman and her daughter, Alice Huffman Ball, opened Tri-State Healthcare and Pain Management. A DEA investigation later found that people would drive for as many as 10 hours to a Huffman's clinic, pay $200 in cash to sit with a doctor and get a prescription for Oxycontin, Lortab, Percocet, and many other pain meds. The mother and daughter hired temp agency doctors and threatened those who refused to prescribe pain medications. Several physicians left immediately. In April 2003, the Huffmans solved their labor issues when they hired a Chicago chronic pain specialist named Paul Volkman. Volkman was so prolific that the Huffmans had to open their own pain dispensary in the back of Tri-State after local pharmacies refused to honor his prescriptions. This pharmacy was somewhat legal under Ohio law. By September 2005, Volkman had written prescriptions for 1 million pills of various kinds. Another 1 million pills were deemed missing due to the lack of any records kept by him or the Huffmans. A DEA investigation estimated that Volkman and the Huffmans took in some $3 million from patients paying $200 a visit, and who lined up well before the clinic opened. The Huffmans paid staffers in pills, but staff also accepted bribes in pills usually, to move patients up in line. Volkman rarely performed anything resembling a diagnosis. Instead, he met with patients briefly, asked them a few questions, one of which was whether they were undercover law enforcement officers. He often ordered urine tests, but ignored them when they showed high levels of opiates. He had one patient sign a death waiver in which the patient acknowledged he might die from taking what Volkman was prescribing. At least 12 patients did die while Volkman worked for the Huffmans. He later opened his own clinic in Portsmouth. Then in Chillicothe, and 6 more patients died. For a couple months, Volkman even had a clinic in a house on a residential street in the Portsmouth's Hilltop neighborhood. He was in one of the bedrooms, said one addict. The front room was a waiting area, and the kitchen was where you got your blood pressure checked out. He wrote me some crazy amounts of medication, 480 pills 1 month. No MRIs, no CAT scans, no nothing. There were other pill mills. Volkman and the Huffmans were only part of the story in Scioto County. But not many of the country paid much attention to what was developing in and around Portsmouth. The area was abandoned by politics and power, and even by many who once lived there. Plus, those who remained behind were the first to get caught up in the gathering storm, were complicit in their own degradation, so no one paid them much attention. Folks like those from the Lucasville bottoms. I was poking around southern Ohio trying to understand all this when I encountered a lawyer named Joe Hale. Hale has silver hair, a baritone voice, and a Marlboro Red always at the ready. By 1999 he had been a defense attorney for 15 years in Scioto County, a country boy from the Oak of Appalachia. Hale had a client list that was mostly court-appointed. The money wasn't great, but it kept him busy and in the courtroom. One place Hale had made a lot of his money was Lucasville. Lucasville is a small town a few minutes north of Portsmouth along Highway 23. It has a prison that holds Ohio's death house, where death row inmates are executed. Across the street from the prison is a high school. Lucasville also includes a couple stoplights, a gas station or two, and a few failed restaurants. But to Joe Hale, Lucasville was the bottoms. The Lucasville bottoms are flatlands that flood every decade or so when the nearby Scioto River rises. The rest of the time, the bottoms provide cheap housing, most of it of the single-wide mobile home variety. Many of its residents are on federal disability. Many of them are small-time criminals. Joe Hale had defended hundreds of bottoms residents through his career on charges of drug possession, domestic violence, and drunk and disorderly. The bottoms are a clannish place, but Hale became well known there. He got used to the rhythms of the bottoms, which revolved around government checks on the first of the month. People rarely visited a doctor, and when they did, it was to guys like David Proctor who accepted cash. In the late 1990s, as David Proctor was heavily prescribing Oxycontin, a client named Tony Blevins showed up to do some work on Hale's house with a bottle of pills. Blevins called them OCs. He offered Hale a few. Hale had no interest in the pills, but he noticed that several of his usually energetic construction workers are like zombies. He came to find out people in the bottoms were crushing the pills and injecting them. Most bottoms denizens didn't know how to do that. A profession called shooters thrived in the bottom for a while. For a free hit for themselves, shooters would inject users who were new to the needle. Over the next 3, 4, 5 months, Oxy was all you heard about, Hale said. Some people were very experienced, very well known, with years as drug users. They started overdosing and dying because they were people with criminal records and never made a contribution to society. Nobody gave a damn. This had been going on for a while, to Hale's growing alarm, when in April 1999, Jack Burton paid him a visit. Burton was the unofficial godfather of the Lucasville bottoms, influential among many families rumored to be involved in crime. A gaunt fellow, Burton drove a white sedan, and in it, slunk down behind the wheel, he cruised to the bottoms. Burton's daughter Jackie had just died of an Oxycontin overdose. Hale had defended Jackie Burton after a couple barroom brawls that landed her in court. The first time Jackie Burton was shot up with Oxycontin, she nodded off, and the shooter who injected her wasn't paying attention. She was probably dead for an hour before anyone noticed. Now Jack Burton was in Hale's office asking what he could do about the company that made the drug. Jack, Hale told him, you're asking me to take on a major pharmaceutical corporation. He turned Burton down, but months passed and the deaths in the bottoms mounted. Hale kept thinking. This was a lawsuit that could mean a lot of money, he said. In May 2001, Hale filed what is believed to be the first Oxy-related wrongful death lawsuit against Purdue Pharma on behalf of Jackie Burton. Purdue Pharma has unleashed a pharmaceutical atomic bomb into the free flow of commerce with absolutely disastrous consequences that they should have foreseen, he told the Portsmouth Daily Times. A Cincinnati law firm eventually joined Hale's case, preparing it as a class-action lawsuit, and asked Hale to find more plaintiffs. Hale found petty thieves and able-bodied disability recipients, people whose already dysfunctional lives had been further mangled by opiate addiction. Several months later, the Cincinnati firm withdrew from the suit. Nobody told me that a class representative shouldn't have a bunch of felony convictions, Hale said, and that there were all these ideals that these class action plaintiffs were supposed to have. The Bottoms sure didn't produce anyone that a TV camera or jury would find sympathetic. After a few court hearings with him at one table and 6 or 8 well-dressed Purdue attorneys on the other, Hale dropped the suit. But he always saw the Lucasville Bottoms as an early warning sign that Ohio and the country ignored at their peril. A Purdue Pharma press release later noted that the company had won every suit filed against it. That didn't surprise Joe Hale. By the time you were in a position to have a lawsuit against Purdue Pharma, you were already likely to have fucked up so badly that you wouldn't work as a class action plaintiff. He said as we drove around the Bottoms one spring day, down lanes of narrow mobile homes and junked cars. But that's how it was as the opiate epidemic took shape in the southern Ohio beginning in the late 1990s. Portsmouth, the Lucasville Bottoms, and other forgotten places of America nearby acted like the Canaries in those now shuttered Appalachian coal mines. Just no one in the country listened much until more respectable types sounded the same alarm and famous people died. Have a good day, friends.